many countries throughout the Americas and the world that are affected because of U.S. military choices of violence. And so at this time, we begin our No Mas Litany. No mas, no more, we must stop the dirty war. Compañeros, compañeras, we cry out. No mas, no more.
Today, we are gathering to stand in the tradition of Gandhi, Aung San Suu Kyi, Dorothy Day, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Cesar Chavez, Ken Saro-Wiwa, and all those who have gone before us in the way of justice. We can name only some victims here, but they call to memory the other hundreds of thousands who have suffered and died. May our witness honor them all.
SOA violence and the racist system of domination it represents are a continuation of the trail of tears that ravage the indigenous people of this country. We hold up the ongoing struggle of our indigenous sisters and brothers who first lived in this land. We cry, no mas, no more, we must stop the dirty war. Compañeros, compañeras, we cry out, no mas, no more.
En México, la llamada guerra contra las drogas está causando estragos en las comunidades, sobre todo desde que Felipe Calderón intensificó la guerra a petición de los Estados Unidos después de su victoria electoral fraudulenta en el 2006. Enrique Peña Nieto, elegido en 2012, ha continuado y exacerbado la militarización y la violencia sin sentido, en donde más de 100,000 mexicanos y mexicanas han muerto y más de 32,000 han desaparecido en los últimos años. Se estima que unos 100,000 migrantes centroamericanos y centroamericanas también han sido asesinados o desaparecidos solo en México.
Due to a lack of political will by the Mexican state, the majority of disappearances of children, men and women have not been investigated, and their bodies have yet not been found, dead or alive. In June, at least 15 people, including teenage girls, were summarily executed by the military in Tlatlaya and accused of being drug traffickers despite contrary proof. In September 26, 6 people were massacred and 43 young students were disappeared in Ayotzinapa. Mexico is convulsing with debt. Our government is financing it. Our media is ignoring it, and migrants continue to come here only to be greeted and disdained. We cry,
No mas, no more, we must stop the dirty war. Compañeros, compañeras, we cry out, no mas, no more.
In Colombia, the U.S. has access to over 7 military bases. The country has long been the #1 client of the School of the Americas, sending over 10,000 troops since 2000, when Plan Colombia was implemented. Colombia now has over 5 million internally displaced persons, the highest number in the world after Syria. The majority of the displaced are indigenous and Afro-Colombians, and many of them were living close to natural resources or other land sought by oligarchs and multinational corporations. Un informe reciente ilustra los más de 6,000 casos de falsos positivos perpetrados por las Fuerzas Armadas colombianas con el fin de aumentar el número de bajas y recibir bonos. Graduados de la Escuela de las Américas suelen estar al mando de unidades ofensivas. Sin embargo, tanto el ejército estadounidense como el Congreso ven a Colombia como ejemplo de éxito. Actualmente Colombia exporta su entrenamiento militar a toda América Latina y el resto del mundo. Clamamos.
No más, no more, we must stop the dirty war. Compañeros, compañeras, we cry out. No más, no more.
A más de 5 años del golpe de Estado en Honduras, propiciado por egresados de la Escuela de las Américas, y tras la consumación del golpe de Estado en las elecciones de todos estos años y que ahora ha impuesto al presidente Juan Orlando Hernández, el Estado de Honduras ha seguido con su política de terror y de violencia contra sus ciudadanas y ciudadanos. La militarización como política de Estado representa hoy más que nunca un mayor peligro para los movimientos sociales y la oposición política. Y esta militarización ha convertido a Honduras en el país con el más alto nivel de violencia de todo el mundo. Clamamos.
In Honduras, the militarization of society is brought about by the police and the new military police that work at the behest of large landowners. They suppress peasant groups that are protecting their land, as in the cases of the Bajo Aguan in the north and Zacate Grande in the south. Yet we cannot forget that one of the intellectual authors of the chaos and destruction in Honduras is the Pentagon, as SOA graduates are at the helm in all branches of the Honduran security forces. We cry,
No más, no more, we must stop the dirty war. Compañeros, compañeras, we cry out. No más, no more.
In Chile, 41 years after the military coup, there are still many families who are searching for the bodies of the disappeared. Our indigenous people, the Mapuche nation, is demanding the right to their land and sovereignty, and students continue to call for free and quality education. 41 years after the military coup, the police continue to repress the right of civilians to protest, and the systematic practice of state-sponsored torture continues in prisons. 41 years after the military coup, military personnel continue to be trained at the School of the Americas. Today, some graduates are facing justice in Chile for committing grave human rights violations. We cry.
No more, we must stop the dirty war. Compañeros, compañeras, we cry out. No más, no more.
In Brazil, mass mobilizing to reveal the FIFA mafia has changed the discourse of the World Cup. Brazil's investment of $14 billion in the World Cup has burst to the surface the anger of the masses, for whom the stadiums mean hunger and demolished homes. The FBI has furthered suppression of World Cup opposition by training the Brazilian riot police. Yet, resistance prevails. The displacement of low-income communities to make way for World Cup projects and the mass protests in the streets of Brazil were captured to tape and circulated around the world. Through their mobilization, resistors have overcome the odds, generating discussion about the economic empire by militarized state violence. As the struggle for fair economies continues, we cry,
No más, no more, we must stop the dirty war. Compañeros, compañeras, we cry out. No más, no more.
In the Dominican Republic, Canadian mining giants Goldcorp and Barrick Gold have taken advantage of the lack of strong mining regulation to ram through the Pueblo Viejo gold mine. President Danilo Medina has called the low returns from the project to the Dominican people and high profits gained by the international corporations as unacceptable. Those who live near the mine go further to demand its closure. displaced communities subjected to its pollution, are on the front lines of the anti-mining movement's fierce challenge to the inequities of free trade policies in the country. In solidarity with those communities directly impacted by mega development projects, we cry.
No más, no more, we must stop the dirty war. Compañeros, compañeras, we cry out. No más, no more.
In Guatemala, the seams of social society were ripped apart by violence backed by the United States during 36 years of armed conflict and U.S. intervention. These wounds continue to shape the lives of Guatemalans today as the steadfast determination of the ruling class to keep their power struggles against those searching for healing through truth-seeking and justice. The United States also continues to be a powerful force of intervention in the country by shamefully aiding the militarization of the country and supporting President Otto Pérez Molina, a graduate from the School of the Americas, who has been implicated in past and recent human rights violations against communities in resistance. One of those activists murdered this year in the fight for self-determination and her community's right to consultation is Marilyn Topacio Reynoso, a brave 19-year-old woman at the front lines of the anti-mining movement.
Near San Diego in 2010, and despite well-documented cases of systematic practices by Border Patrol agents to strip our sisters and brothers of their dignity and humanity, the death toll rises. The scrutiny of migrant stories by the general population and the disproportionate exclusion of migrants from Latin America and the Caribbean and the U.S. and Canada has severely fractured our global community. We echo the strong voices of migrants fighting for justice when we cry.
No más, no more, we must stop the dirty war. Compañeros, compañeras, we cry out. No más, no more.
In the Middle East, the proxy wars in Iraq and Syria are marked by U.S. interference without accountability mechanisms. In the fervor to top the Syrian government, it is undeniable that ISIS received arms, money, and training by Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates, with at least the tacit approval of the United States. In the first month of U.S. airstrikes in Syria, more than 500 so-called jihadists have died, as well as 32 civilians. Yet the process of verifying the identities of the dead and their crimes has not been detailed, nor transparent to the public. On 23rd, at least 5 children and 2 adults were killed by a Tomahawk cruise missile in Kafr Daryan, Syria, a place with no military target. The owner of the missile has not been held accountable for its actions. This is a pattern we are seeing wherever the U.S. military training is involved. Impunity allotted to the U.S. for its actions in the Middle East echoes the lack of accountability of the Pentagon for the School of the Americas. In the name of those who have fallen victim to U.S.-generated terrorism, and in the name of the resilience of the masses, we cry.
No más, no more, we must stop the dirty war. Compañeros, compañeras, we cry out. No más, no more.
In Gaza, the world's largest open-air prison, this summer 1,486 Palestinians were killed, including 500 children, and killed in what is known as the most deadly of the attacks upon the people of Gaza by Israeli forces in recent history. The United States funds Israel $3 billion a year in military aid and furnishes U.S. military equipment. Hundreds of Gazans have drowned in the Mediterranean Sea while desperately trying to escape. Gaza's fighting against occupation and blockades have spurred solidarity actions across the globe, including a march in Chile, where 5,000 people marched to the Israeli embassy in Santiago to protest Israeli attacks on Palestine. As the fight for sovereignty continues, we cry.
No más, no more, we must stop the dirty war. Compañeros, compañeras, we cry out. No más, no more.
Lumpkin, Georgia, the largest for-profit migration prison rips families apart